To autocast, click on this target icon. Move the target to where you want to cast, then click on the left mouse button to place it. Now, simply click on this cast button. To reel in, hold down the left mouse button. You can control the rod position, left, right, up, or down, by simply moving the mouse. To bring in the lure fast, just right-click. For a truer fishing experience, try casting manually. Click and hold down on the cast button. Drag the mouse back to pull back the rod, then push the mouse forward, releasing the mouse button to cast the lure. This takes a little more skill, but makes casting pretty realistic. When you get a strike, pull the mouse back sharply to set your hook. As you reel the fish in, pull back to keep your rod high and watch the line tension meter on the left. You want to keep enough tension on the fish to wear it down fast. If the line starts to strain, you'll see it and hear it. Ease off by pushing the mouse forward or just stop reeling. Now, if the big ones keep breaking your line, try a lower reel speed, a lower drag setting, or a heavier line weight.
When bass are shallow, they hold in the shade near docks, weeds, or other structure. But if the light is low or the water is stained, you may find them on feeding sprees in the open flats.
When bass are moving between shallows in the open lake, they often gather along drop-offs, creek channels, and other break-line structure. Bounce the lure off the structure to trigger a reaction. When clear skies drive bass under heavy cover, you'll need heavy gear to get them out. Use a big weedless soft bait or a spoon that's easy to see, and fish with a high rod tip. When you see the strike, drop the lure and then set the hook hard.
Bass avoid surface water when it's outside their comfort range. In these cases, try fishing deeper offshore drop-offs and break line structure, or vertical structure like standing timber and bridge foundations.
When you're fishing real clear water and it's a real bright day, concentrate your efforts in vegetation. Things like lily pads and hydrilla. And more than that, really key in on the shady little pockets or any other place in those weeds that border other structure. That's where the fish will be.
Grassy flats and reeds attract insects and bait fish, so you'll often find feeding bass nearby. During the spawn, these flats also provide prime bedding areas.
You can often find bass holding near fallen timber because it's full of hiding spots. Try to retrieve your lure along the branches, not across. This keeps your lure in the strike zone longer and reduces hang-ups. Points on the lakeshore usually have good bass structure below. Work the windy side first. The wind concentrates insects and bait fish along the shore. Additional cover like stumps, rocks, or weeds could mean a hot spot.
Bass often scout around rock piles and man-made riprap on lakes looking for crawdads, especially when there aren't that many bait fish in the area. Try this. I want you to take a deep diving crankbait or even a jig and crawl it through the rocks. You'll be surprised what you'll get.
When bass are moving between shallows in the open lake, they often gather along drop-offs, creek channels, and other break line structure. Bounce the lure off the structure to trigger a reaction.
In the middle of summer or winter, bass commonly move to deep water structure and hold there tight. You might want to tempt them with jigs or soft plastics worked slow through their hangout.
To find active bass in the flats, try spinnerbaits or shallow crankbaits. These do a great job of imitating bait fish and let you cover a lot of water quickly.
In a cold lake, look for a feeder creek bringing in warmer water. Just get within casting distance of an inflow and try a spinnerbait or jig and pig near the best structure.
When the surface water is very warm, try to find a cool feeder creek. The bass will seek out the cooler water for both comfort and forage. Try a crankbait, jig, or bottom rig soft bait and work the lure along the incoming current.
Cold weather doesn't always mean bad bass fishing. All you need to do is find their winter hangouts. What I'd like you to look for is deep water structure, something like a deep vertical point or maybe even the drop of a creek channel. Also, remember to keep your presentation slow because at this time of year, the bass's metabolism is slow. Match it.
To catch midday bass during the summer, use your depth finder to locate deep weed lines, rock piles, and breaks, and other deep water structure. This is a great place to try a jig, soft plastic, or deep diving crankbait. Bump the bottom cover to trigger a strike.
Moderate water temperatures usually bring bass into the shallows to chase bait fish. You might try a spinnerbait, topwater, or shallow running crankbait around heavy cover. For a better presentation, Vary the retrieve speed with an occasional pause or twitch. When bass are moving between shallows in the open lake, they often gather along drop-offs, creek channels, and other break line structure. Bounce the lure off the structure to trigger a reaction.
Most lakes experience something called a fall turnover, and turnover just basically means that the deep water in the lake trades places with the chilled water on the surface. Now, many times this makes the bass pretty finicky and sometimes hard to catch. So during this period of time, I'd like you to concentrate on the break lines or any deep water structure, and also be very patient because the strike zone will be very, very small. Topwater lures are great for warm, shallow water. You get to see all the action. If you see a bass following your lure, maintain the same retrieve speed until he strikes. Now, if he loses interest, you can tease that fish into biting by simply using a jerk and pause retrieve. You'll get him.
When using your depth finder, scout drop-offs, points, break lines, and creek channel edges for additional structure like rocks or weeds. Structure on structure can be a real hot spot.
20 feet or more under the surface, the water temperature isn't affected much by changes in air temperature. That's why bass go deep when the surface is too hot or cold. Bounce jigs, soft plastics, or spoons off the bottom structure for best results.
Most of the year, bass are active in the shallows early in the morning, but as the sun gets higher and increases the light in the shallows, bass relate more to the cover in deep water.
As sunset approaches, bass often move back into the shallows to feed. They'll usually remain active until dark. A topwater can be dynamite. On a clear day, bass will be holding under heavy cover or in deep water. Cast or pitch to any shaded areas you see, then retrieve the lure into the strike zone.
When runoff or plankton blooms stain the water, it usually helps your fishing. It lets you work closer to structure and not be as finicky about your tackle and presentation.
Clear weather and calm water makes bass wary. Try long casts and delicate presentations with smaller natural colored lures and rigs. With spinners and crankbaits, try a fast retrieve to trigger that predator instinct. Although wind stirs up the surface and makes fish less wary, it also makes it harder to cast and detect strikes on soft bait. If you use a split shot or Carolina rig, you can increase the sinker without affecting the lure much. In addition, fish tend to hold on to these rigs longer after the strike. Points on the lakeshore usually have good bass structure below. Work the windy side first. The wind concentrates insects and bait fish along the shore. Additional cover like stumps, rocks, or weeds could mean a hot spot.
For best results in heavy wind, cast right into it or fish along with it. This will help keep your line straight and provide the best feel of your lure. Casting crosswind puts too much belly in your line and makes strike detection difficult.
When the water surface is warm and glassy, the fish are going to be very wary. Try using light tackle and finesse techniques, or move to deeper water where the bass will be less spooky.
On hot days, bass are going to be in deeper water holding tight in the cool shade around docks or heavy cover. Try a floating worm around the docks or a Texas rigged worm in dense cover.
Cold days cause the fish to be sluggish and normally pretty deep. Whatever you use it slow. The strike zone is going to be small. Once you find the fish, keep working that spot. Bass tend to school tightly under these conditions.
A warming trend on a cool lake can mean action in the shallows any time of the year. As soon as the bass become aware of warmer water, they'll move to it, not only to be more comfortable, but to follow the bait.
On bright sunny days, bass have a tendency to hold tight to cover. Look for dock pilings, timber, weed lines, bluffs, or any shaded area where fish can hide from predators and ambush their prey.
Bass in cold water are often responsive to a little sunshine warming up the shallows, and the northeast corner of a lake tends to be the most exposed and will warm up first.
Cloud cover usually helps the fishing. The softer light makes bass more apt to prowl for food and respond to a wider strike zone. Use faster, flashier lures to get their attention.
Rainy days often make bass feed like crazy. Look for them to congregate around vegetation, points, and areas where feeder creeks enter the lake.
A cold rain often shuts down the fishing because it causes an abrupt drop in surface temperature. Bass will move tight to cover or go deep. You have to get the lure right in their faces for a strike.
Before the spawn, look for the warmest water in the lake to find fish. After the spawn, food sources and structure play a more important role.
During the spawn, bass prefer to use the shallows, especially those with a hard bottom. So fish these areas that are protected by grass and reeds and any other form of cover. You see, they'll often attack anything that threatens their nests, especially those bottom-rig salamanders and lizards.
Post-spawn patterns are tough. The male bass remain in the shallows, while female bass relate to transitional structure such as deep break lines along points and coves. They can be pretty finicky. Walking the dog with a floating stick bait sometimes brings the females to the surface.
Bass have a fairly predictable summer routine. You see, they'll feed in the shallows in the early morning and again late in the afternoon, but during the day they usually hold on deeper water in and around vertical structure. Also, don't forget to keep your topwater tied on, because they'll school even in the hottest part of the day.
As the shallow water weeds die back in early fall, bass are looking for big meals around the remaining weed beds. Try big crankbaits or spinner baits along the edge. As fall progresses, bass move towards their winter hangouts. You might try flipping a jig and pig in the heaviest cover you can find near points, drop-offs, creek walls, and other deep water breaks.
Bass have a fairly predictable summer routine. You see, they'll feed in the shallows in the early morning and again late in the afternoon, but during the day they usually hold on deeper water in and around vertical structure. Also, don't forget to keep your topwater tied on, because they'll school even in the hottest part of the day. Bright colors like chartreuse or fire tiger may not look natural to you, but they are more visible to the bass, especially in low light and in muddy water. They also make it easier for you to see the strikes in shallow water. I always keep one tied on.
Hopping a crawdad-colored lure through rocky structure can really pay off in the mornings and evenings. But keep in mind that crawdad color varies from lake to lake. The correct color may be anything from bright orange to almost black.
Around weeds, grass, or timber, the bass will be looking for bait fish. Spinner baits, shallow water crankbaits, and topwater lures are all good bets. Vary your retrieve to trigger more strikes.
A dark-colored lure is a good choice most any time, especially in low light or stained water conditions. It always provides a dark silhouette to draw attention.
Those bright days on a clear water lake can be pretty tough, mostly because the bass can get a real good look at your lure. Now in these conditions, I go with the natural colors and try and imitate what the fish are actually feeding on. Another tip is to use a really fast retrieve to trigger a reaction strike.
Soft plastic baits have a very realistic action, and their feel keeps fish holding on longer so you can set the hook. Use a Carolina or split shot rig to work gradual slopes, break lines, or weed lines. For heavy cover or vertical structure, a Texas rig will do a better job.
A great way to work medium to deep water is jigging a soft plastic grub. Bounce the grub off of rocks or anything else that's submerged down there, but always be alert. Bass often strike during the lure's free fall, and that's when it's hardest to detect.
When using a wacky worm, twitch it and let it sit for long pauses. Use a jerk, pause, jerk retrieve to make the loose ends flutter. That added action may be all you need to tease a reluctant bass into striking.
Plastic worms can imitate many different bass foods in a wide range of conditions. Reds and browns look like crawfish. Black and other dark colors look like leeches. Lighter colors imitate bait fish and worms.
Fussy bass might fall for a tube bait. Its slow, spiral falling action draws lots of attention. Pitch it into brush and weed patches or sidearm it underneath docks.
The soft jerkbait works real well anytime bait fish are in the water and bass are shallow. What's more, bass will hold on to it a bit longer than other topwater lures. How you use it? Retrieve it with a series of jerks and long pauses.
A floating worm works well in the shallow water beneath overhanging trees, docks, and similar structure. Use light colors and a slow twitching retrieve to give the lure the most enticing action.
A Carolina rig soft bait is a good way to cover medium depth structures. Use a slow to medium speed retrieve along the bottom, dragging or hopping the sinker with frequent pauses. If you find yourself missing strikes, tie on a more visible lure. Bass may be hitting the sinker.
A Texas rig keeps the hook point buried in the bait, making it ideal for weedless presentations. Work it through structure in short hops. When you feel a strike, drop the rod tip, reel up some slack, and set the hook hard.
The split shot rig is small and subtle, making it a good choice for clear water or spooky bass. Use it with grubs, small worms, or even tube baits on light spinning gear. Remember to set the hook just as soon as you detect a strike.
To make your lure appear larger and natural in low light, clear water conditions, use a trailer color that matches the color of your lure. To make your lure appear larger and natural in low light, clear water conditions, use a trailer color that matches the color of your lure.
To make your lure appear larger and more visible in muddy water or stormy conditions, use a trailer color that's highly visible, like white, chartreuse, or black.
Shallow weed and wood cover are excellent places to try a spinnerbait. Choose a blade color that matches the forage in water clarity. For the best accuracy and lure control, use a medium-heavy bait casting outfit.
Calm, shallow water is the very best place to try topwater lures. They're a great weapon for prompting reflex strikes, especially on flats. I want you to try a highly visible buzzbait and bump it into any form of cover you can find, and hold on tight.
Crankbaits work well around rock structures, sparse wood, and weed lines. When baitfish are present, choose a lure size that matches. If the water is clear, start with natural baitfish colors. If the water is stained or muddy, go with bright or dark colors.
Shallow diving crankbaits are best for imitating baitfish near the shore, especially over submerged cover. Now, you can keep your lure shallow by increasing your line size, keeping your rod tip high, or just simply slowing down your retrieve.
Medium-depth crankbaits can be ideal for working transitional structure along the shallows. Use a light-action rod and bump the lure along any drop-offs, ledges, or other cover you can find.
Deep diving crankbaits are best for structures on steeper drop-offs, break lines, ledges, and channels. To make a crankbait run its deepest, use light line and long casts, and retrieve it at a medium-slow speed with your rod angle low, bumping the lure into any structure or cover that you can. Now remember, when the lure bumps into something, pause the retrieve. That's usually when you get a strike.
Lipless crankbaits are great for covering a lot of water fast. Try high-speed retrieves along the edges of weed lines, vertical walls, and over submerged weed beds. Keep the lure barely ticking the edge of the weeds for the best results. For surface weeds in warm water, try a weedless spoon. One approach is to add a trailer and use a steady retrieve with heavy bait casting gear. You can also try a tumbling retrieve. Let the lure flutter to the bottom, pull it up, and let it flutter down again.
A jigging spoon is a great way to zero in on the deep or suspended bass. Work it along the edges of creek channels, near deep structures, and on the edges of baitfish schools. Let it drop all the way to the fish, then sweep it up with the rod tip and drop it again. Watch your line for the strike.
Spinning gear gives you the best feel and control, especially when using those small, soft baits, or light line, or something like a split shot rig. Also, you can cast farther on a windy day with a lot more control.
Casting gear is your best choice anytime you're looking at heavy cover, heavy line, or conditions that demand hook setting power. It also provides the ability to make pinpoint casts. A flipping rod is best for working close to timber and other heavy cover. It helps you drop your lure quietly into the densest cover and provides the necessary power to wrestle bass out.
When the water you're fishing is really clear, believe you me, the fish can see your lure very well. This is a good time to try finesse fishing with light action spinning gear. Remember, finicky bass often find smaller lures and lighter line more appealing.
Medium action rods work best with Carolina rigs and Texas rigged worms. It gives you control over the lure, but isn't too stiff, which will sometimes take the lure away from the fish. If you're using heavy lures or working in heavy cover, you're better off with heavy action casting gear. It's stiff enough to work with pitching and flipping techniques and helps you horse a big bass out of cover.
When you're looking for bass, the season is your first clue. You see, in the spring, bass seek shallow, warm water. And in the fall, they prefer what we call transitional structure zones, like a point or a drop-off. But in hot and cold weather, they have a tendency to spend much of their time on those deeper drop-offs.
Since bass are ambush predators by nature, you'll find them where they have both something to hide in and something to eat. Any good structure or cover with baitfish or crawdads in the water is worth exploring.
Places that look good for bass won't be if other conditions aren't right. For example, shallow cover and clear water won't be very productive in the middle of a hot summer day.
As ambush predators, black bass have a tendency to stick to cover or use structure. However, in open water, you're likely to hook up with a big school of roving white bass or stripers.
The overhand cast is the best choice for most presentations. It offers the best combination of maximum distance and accuracy.
For maximum distance, you can't beat a two-handed cast, but you do sacrifice some accuracy and the lure tends to hit the water with a bigger splash.
Your best bet for casting under obstacles is a sidearm cast or underhand pitch. It keeps the lure low for improved accuracy, minimal hang-ups, and super quiet entry.
An underhand pitch cast provides a little extra reach than a flip cast to hit those nearby targets. It's still extremely accurate and has very little splash.
There's no better way to work close to shallow cover than flip casting. It provides the most accurate, splashless presentation and a vertical drop.
As the water cools off, bass metabolism slows down and the strike zone shrinks. This means you need to slow your retrieve down too, so that your lure behaves naturally and the bass have a chance to hit it.
Give your rod tip an occasional jerk when working crankbaits, soft plastic jerkbaits, and floating worms. You see, this makes the lure look as if it's trying to evade a pursuer, and it can trigger a great reaction strike.
Topwater lures are most effective when retrieved with a series of jerks and pauses. This erratic motion makes the lure appear injured and an easy meal.
If you're working lures over thick weeds, use a steady retrieve. The steady pace helps the fish track the lure through the cover.
Pockets in the weeds are great places to work a jig or a Texas rig soft bait. Drop your lure into the pocket, let it sink, lift it, and then let it sink again. Pay real close attention to your line because most of your strikes come as the lure falls.
Bass on flats or break line structures and slopes can be fooled by jigs, cranks, and soft baits hopped along the bottom. Bump into things or stir up the mud to make a commotion. In cold water or dense cover, you can work soft baits and jigs right on the bottom. One approach is to let the lure sit with just an occasional twitch, but be patient. Bass often take a long time to respond in these conditions.
Shallow, glassy water is a good setting for topwater presentations. Set your lure floating right next to some cover. Then, every once in a while, give it a twitch.
In deeper water, vertical structures like pilings or timber are perfect for vertical fishing. Bass tend to suspend anywhere they find conditions to their liking, so test various depths along the structure until you find them.
Equipped with state-of-the-art electronics, dual live wells, tackle storage, and coolers, the bass boat's an expensive tool and a home away from home for the competitive angler.
Your depth finder is a powerful tool. Besides using it to locate fish, use it to monitor water temperature and identify bottom structure. When landing a fish you're planning to release, don't use a net. Gently grab the bass by the lower lip, remove the hooks, and lower him into the water.
The largemouth will eat just about anything, in or on the water. Fish, frogs, bugs, well, even small birds and mammals. Even if it's not hungry, it may attack out of territorial or competitive instincts. Its smashing attack is the key reason largemouth are so popular with anglers. Spotted bass prefer deeper water and are a bit more predictable than their larger cousins. Now, they may go for a jig or soft bait dragged across the bottom any time of year. Smallmouth bass are great fighters and are common in many cool northern lakes that other bass can't tolerate. Now, the young stripers look a lot like white bass and are often caught in the same places. If the bass aren't biting, crappie and sunfish give you a big fight in a small package.
Places that look good for bass won't be if other conditions aren't right. For example, shallow cover and clear water won't be very productive in the middle of a hot summer day.